The hospital room smelled of antiseptic, sharp and sterile, cutting through the fog of my pain. My phone buzzed on the bedside table, its screen glowing with my mother's name. I answered, my voice weak from the fever that had gripped me for days. "Mom, I'm scared," I said, clutching the thin blanket. "The doctors don't know what's wrong yet." Her reply was cold, clipped, like a door slamming shut. "Laura, we can't drop everything to sit by your bed. Your father and I have plans, a charity gala tomorrow. You're an adult. Handle it." The line went dead. My name is Laura Bennett, and at 29, I lay alone in a Seattle hospital, my body racked with an undiagnosed illness, abandoned by the parents I'd always believed would be there. But as the silence settled, a spark of resolve flickered within me. They'd chosen their priorities. Now, I'd choose mine. Before the hospital, my life was a vibrant tapestry, each thread woven with care, ambition, and a deep-rooted sense of duty. I lived in a third-floor walk-up in Seattle's Capitol Hill, a cozy apartment where the morning light streamed through tall windows, casting soft shadows on the creaky hardwood floors. The walls were a canvas of my passions, shelves sagging under the weight of design books, framed prints from local art fairs, and a corkboard pinned with sketches, color swatches, and client notes. My kitchen, barely big enough for two, was my morning sanctuary. I'd brew coffee in a French press, the rich, nutty aroma mingling with the faint scent of lavender from a candle on the counter, as I sat at a thrift store table, my laptop glowing with emails and design drafts. As a freelance graphic designer, my days were a whirlwind of creativity and hustle, crafting logos for scrappy tech startups, tweaking brand guidelines for artisanal coffee shops, and pitching bold concepts to clients who trusted my vision. I'd spend hours in my small office nook, surrounded by sticky notes and half-empty mugs, losing myself in the flow of Photoshop and Illustrator. Each signed contract was a triumph, celebrated with a glass of cheap Merlot on my balcony, the Seattle skyline twinkling under a blanket of stars, whispering promises of a future I was building step by step. My work was more than a job, it was my identity. I'd built a reputation for intuitive, vibrant designs, landing clients like Greenwave Tech, a startup whose app went viral thanks to my sleek branding. I'd meet clients at trendy Capitol Hill cafes, my laptop balanced on wobbly tables as we brainstormed over oat milk lattes. One regular, Priya, a bakery owner whose logo I'd designed, would send me fresh scones as thanks, her emails brimming with gratitude. "You made my dream real," she wrote once, and I'd pinned the note to my corkboard, a reminder of why I pushed through the late nights. My dream was bigger, a design studio of my own, a space where I could mentor young creatives and take on passion projects. But that dream was always, next year, deferred by the demands of my life, particularly my family. My parents, Richard and Diane, lived an hour away in Bellevue, in a sprawling colonial house that gleamed with polished mahogany furniture and manicured lawns. They were my anchor, the people I turned to for comfort, advice, and connection, or so I believed. Growing up, I'd spent countless weekends in their pristine home, helping my mother arrange roses for her charity luncheons or my father polish his golf trophies, their shelves a shrine to his country club victories. I called them every Sunday, my voice echoing through their cavernous living room as we caught up over speakerphone, their laughter warm but fleeting. Holidays were a whirlwind of activity, Thanksgiving dinners with their Bellevue elite friends, Christmas parties where I'd pour wine to keep the conversation flowing, my mother's diamond earrings glinting under the chandelier. I cherished those moments, the pride in their eyes when they introduced me as our talented Laura, the daughter who'd made it on her own terms. But that love came at a steep price. 2 years ago, they'd hit what they called a financial rough patch. Their early retirement, funded by a modest pension and dwindling savings, couldn't sustain their lavish lifestyle, weekend trips to Napa, a new sunroom with custom windows, memberships at the Bellevue Country Club. They'd asked for help, their voices heavy with feigned shame over the phone. I didn't hesitate, draining my savings to cover their $10,000 property tax bill, money I'd earned through side gigs and sleepless nights. "We'll pay you back," sweetheart, my mother had promised, her tone syrupy. I believed her, dipping into the fund I'd set aside for a trip to Italy, a dream sparked in college when I'd studied Renaissance art. I'd spent years sketching Florence's Duomo, imagining myself wandering its cobblestone streets, but I pushed it aside, telling myself family came first. I started sending them $500 monthly for household expenses, a habit I fell into without questioning, even when my own budget tightened. I skipped freelance conferences, new software upgrades, even a weekend getaway with Maya, all to keep their lifestyle afloat. My best friend, Maya, a barista with a sharp wit and a heart of gold, saw through their facade. We'd meet at her cafe, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the constant hiss of the espresso machine. Over steaming lattes, she'd lean across the table, her dark eyes narrowing. "Laura, they're bleeding you dry," she'd say, her voice low but fierce. "When was the last time they thanked you? Or showed up for you?" I'd deflect with a laugh, unwilling to face the truth. "They're my parents, Maya. They raised me, sacrificed for me. They'll come through when I need them." But her words lingered, a seed of doubt I couldn't uproot. My community was my balance, Mrs. Chen, my elderly neighbor, who'd leave dumplings at my door with a shy smile, my cousin Jake, a carpenter in Tacoma, who'd drive up for beers and board games, his laughter filling my apartment, Priya and other clients, whose trust fueled my drive. I'd built a life I loved, one where work, family, and hope intertwined, each sacrifice a brick in the foundation of my future. But that foundation was brittle, and I was too busy, or too loyal, to see the cracks. Those cracks had been forming for years, subtle at first, like whispers I chose to ignore. My parents had always been consumed by their social world, a glittering orbit of charity galas, golf tournaments, and dinner parties with Bellevue's elite. Their lives were a performance, their calendar a meticulously curated showcase of status, cocktail hours at the club, luncheons for the Historical Society, trips to showcase their philanthropy. I'd grown accustomed to their distracted responses, their questions about my life cut short by their own agendas. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say, her voice trailing off as she adjusted a vase for her next event. My father was quieter, his silence a fortress, his attention reserved for his golf scores or the stock market's daily dance. I'd call to share news, a new client, a design award, and they'd hum vague approvals, their minds already elsewhere. I remembered my 25th birthday, when I'd driven to Bellevue for a family dinner, expecting a celebration. I'd worn my favorite dress, a deep blue that made me feel confident, and brought a chocolate cake I'd baked myself, hoping for a moment of connection. Instead, my mother had spent the evening fretting over a misplaced centerpiece for her upcoming luncheon, her manicured nails tapping impatiently on the dining table. My father scrolled through his tablet, muttering about a stock dip, barely glancing at the cake. "We'll do something special next year," my mother had said, her eyes on her phone, texting a caterer. I'd driven home, the cake untouched in the back seat, the Seattle skyline blurring through my tears. Another time, I'd landed a six-figure contract with Greenwave Tech, a career milestone that had me buzzing with pride. I'd rushed to their house, my portfolio in hand, eager to share the mock-ups. They were planning a friend's retirement party, their dining room strewn with invitations and wine lists. "Congratulations," my father mumbled, not looking up from his laptop. "Can you redesign our gala invites? We're on a tight deadline." I'd swallowed my disappointment, agreeing to help, believing their approval was worth the cost. There were other moments, each a small cut that bled my confidence. They'd missed my college graduation, citing a spa weekend they'd forgotten to reschedule, sending a generic card with $50 inside. My 27th birthday passed without a call, though my mother texted later, "Sorry, we were at a fundraiser." I'd organized their 35th anniversary party, spending weeks on custom invitations and a catered menu, only for them to spend the evening networking with their friends, barely acknowledging my effort. Maya had seen it all, her frustration growing with each story. One rainy afternoon at her cafe, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans, she'd grabbed my hand across the table. "Laura, they're not your responsibility," she said, her voice trembling with conviction. "You're killing yourself for people who don't even see you. When was the last time they showed up for you, really?" I'd shrugged, deflecting with a joke about her overpriced lattes, but her words echoed, a challenge I couldn't ignore. The illness had been the final straw, creeping in like an uninvited guest. It started with a low-grade fever, aches that lingered after long workdays, a fatigue that made my limbs feel like lead. I'd ignored it, blaming stress or a virus, popping ibuprofen and pushing through client deadlines. But the symptoms worsened: dizziness, joint pain, a fog that clouded my thoughts. I'd mentioned it to my parents during a Sunday call, hoping for concern. "You work too hard," my mother said, her voice impatient. "Get some rest, Laura." My father grunted, "You're young. You'll be fine." I'd believed them, dismissing the warning signs, until I collapsed in my kitchen, the coffee mug shattering on the tile floor, dark liquid pooling around me. Maya found me, her face pale as she dialed 911, her hands shaking as she helped me to the ambulance. In the hospital, as the doctors ran tests, blood work, scans, cultures, I texted my parents updates, my fingers trembling with hope. "Possible infection," I wrote. "On 4 antibiotics." Their replies were sporadic, single lines like, "Keep us posted," or "Hope you're better soon." I clung to the belief that they were busy, that they'd come when I needed them most. But deep down, the truth was clawing its way to the surface, a painful unraveling of the myth I'd built around their love. The hospital call shattered that myth completely. My mother's words, "You're an adult. Handle it," were a blade, slicing through the illusion of their care. I lay in the dim room, the heart monitor beeping softly, the 4-needle a cold anchor in my arm. My body ached, the fever spiking, but the pain of their betrayal was sharper, a raw wound that throbbed with every heartbeat. I thought of every sacrifice, the $10,000 I'd given them, the monthly checks, the dreams I'd shelved to keep them comfortable. I'd poured my heart into being their daughter, believing they'd be there in my darkest hour. Instead, they'd chosen a charity gala, their social status more precious than their child's life. I saw my childhood flash before me, birthdays spent in their shadow, achievements ignored, my needs always secondary to their ambitions. I remembered the summer I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for college, my body exhausted from late shifts at a diner, while they'd splurged on a new patio, claiming it was for the family. The anger surged, hot and fierce, but beneath it was a deeper hurt, grief for the parents I'd wanted, the ones who'd never existed. Tears welled, but I blinked them back, my jaw tightening. I could have called them again, begged for their presence, their love. The old Laura would have, desperate for their approval, willing to forgive their indifference for a scrap of affection. But something had shifted, a quiet strength rising from the ashes of my pain. Maya's words echoed, "You're stronger than you know." I thought of the nurse who'd adjusted my 4 with gentle hands, the neighbor who'd cared for my cat, the clients who'd sent kind emails. They saw me, valued me, in ways my parents never had. I wasn't their doormat anymore. I'd spent years proving my worth to people who didn't care, and I was done. That night, Maya visited, her curly hair damp from the Seattle rain, her eyes fierce with loyalty. We sat in the dim hospital room, the city lights glinting through the window, and she took my hand. "You don't need them, Laura," she said, her voice steady. "You've got me, your friends, your work. You're not alone." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me from despair. As the fever ebbed, I made a decision, not with tears but with clarity. I wouldn't just survive this illness. I'd build a life without them, one where my worth wasn't tied to their approval. They'd underestimated me, and they'd pay, not with vengeance, but with the life I'd create in their absence. The turning point came a week later, when the doctors delivered their diagnosis, a rare autoimmune disorder, chronic but manageable with immunosuppressants, lifestyle changes, and regular monitoring. The news was a bittersweet relief, a lifeline tinged with the reality of a long recovery, months of medication, physical therapy, and uncertainty. I'd live, but I'd face it without my parents. Or so I thought. Maya mobilized my friends, who transformed my hospital room into a haven of warmth and color. They brought homemade soups in mismatched Tupperware, dog-eared novels from their own shelves, and playlists of indie music to drown out the sterile hum of the hospital. Mrs. Chen sent a care package of herbal teas and knitted socks, her handwritten note in shaky English promising to pray for me. My clients, informed by Maya, sent emails of support, some offering to pause projects, others sending small gifts, a sketchbook, a scented candle. Priya, the bakery owner, delivered a box of scones, her note reading, "You're stronger than this." Their kindness was a revelation, a tapestry of love woven by people who saw me, not my utility. But kindness alone wouldn't secure my future. My savings were gone, drained by my parents' endless needs, and medical bills loomed like a gathering storm. I thought of the $10,000 I'd lent them 2 years ago, money I'd earned through late nights designing logos, skipping meals to meet deadlines, sacrificing my Italy fund. They'd promised to repay it, but instead, they'd spent it on a luxury cruise, not the property taxes they'd claimed. The lie was a fresh wound, but it was also my leverage. I called Emily Tran, a lawyer I'd hired for a contract dispute, her voice crisp and confident over the phone. "I want to recover the money I lent my parents," I said, my voice steady despite the fatigue. "And I want to protect myself moving forward." Emily didn't hesitate. "If you have proof of the loan, we can demand repayment. If they refuse, we go to court. Do you have documentation?" I did. Bank statements showing the transfer, text messages where my mother thanked me for the loan, an email from my father acknowledging the debt. "Good," Emily said. "We'll draft a demand letter for $10,000, due in 30 days. Any other financial ties?" I told her about the $500 monthly transfers, a habit I'd fallen into without questioning. "Cancel them," she advised. "And consider a will to secure your assets." I acted from my hospital bed, my laptop balanced on a tray table, the four tugging at my arm. Logging into my bank account, I navigated to the recurring transfers, my fingers trembling as I clicked "Cancel." Each step felt like breaking a chain, freeing me from the weight of their expectations. I wasn't just stopping the payments, I was reclaiming the dreams I'd deferred: Italy, the studio, a life unburdened by their demands. Emily suggested a will, naming Maya as my beneficiary and guardian of any future children. "You're young, but this illness changes the calculus," she said. I met her at the hospital, signing the papers in a quiet corner, my signature bold despite my shaking hands. The will was a shield, a declaration that my future belonged to me. I researched my condition, reading medical journals on my phone, learning about flare-ups, fatigue management, and dietary triggers. Knowledge was power, and I was done being powerless. My parents thought I'd always be their safety net, their dutiful daughter. They were about to learn I was done catching them. The plan unfolded with quiet precision, each step a deliberate reclaiming of my agency. Emily sent the demand letter to my parents' Bellevue address, certified mail to ensure they couldn't ignore it. I imagined my mother's manicured nails tearing open the envelope, her diamond bracelet glinting as she read the legal demands. My father's scowl would deepen, his fingers tightening around the paper, his pride wounded by the audacity of their daughter standing up to them. I didn't call them. I didn't need their excuses or their outrage. Instead, I focused on healing, starting physical therapy in the hospital's rehab wing. The exercises were grueling, my joints screaming with each stretch, but I pushed through, fueled by a determination to reclaim my body and my life. Maya helped me set up a crowdfunding page, Laura's Fight for Recovery, and I was stunned when donations poured in, not just from friends but from strangers, moved by my story of battling illness alone. Priya contributed $500, her note reading, "Your designs gave my bakery a soul. Now let us give back." A local artist I'd collaborated with sent $200, writing, "You're a fighter, Laura." The funds grew, a testament to the community I'd underestimated. My parents' response was swift and predictable, a storm of texts, voicemails, and emails that lit up my phone like a warning signal. "This is outrageous, Laura," my mother texted, her words dripping with indignation. "After all we've done for you, you're suing us." My father's voicemail was colder, his voice tight with anger. "You're ungrateful. We'll fight this in court, and you'll regret it." I didn't reply, letting their words dissolve into the ether. They tried emotional manipulation next, sending a group email to our extended family, claiming I'd turned my back on them after they'd sacrificed everything. My mother's email was a masterpiece of theatrics, painting herself as a martyr, me as the ungrateful child. But my cousin Jake, a burly carpenter who'd always seen through their polished exterior, called me immediately. "They're lying, aren't they?" he asked, his voice low with fury. "That $10,000 wasn't for taxes, was it?" I told him the truth, the cruise, the lies, their absence during my illness. He was incensed, promising to set the record straight. Word spread, and their carefully curated reputation began to fray, their gala invitations replaced by whispers of their deceit. I leaned into my recovery, attending therapy sessions with Dr. Patel, a kind woman whose gentle questions cut through my defenses. "You've been seeking their love your whole life," she said during one session, her office warm with the scent of sandalwood. "But you don't need it to be whole." Her words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my grief. I joined a support group for young women with chronic illnesses, meeting over Zoom from my hospital bed. Their stories, of pain, resilience, and hope, mirrored mine, and I found strength in their camaraderie. One member, Sarah, a painter with lupus, sent me a sketch of a phoenix, her note reading, "You're rising, Laura." I pinned it to my hospital wall, a reminder of who I was becoming. Another member, Elena, a teacher with rheumatoid arthritis, shared tips on managing fatigue, her emails brimming with practical wisdom. Their support was a lifeline, a new kind of family forged in shared struggle. The consequences for my parents were swift and merciless, a cascade of their own making. They didn't have the $10,000. They'd spent it, along with their savings, on cruises, designer clothes, and a new patio they'd bragged about on social media, their Instagram filled with sunlit photos of tropical beaches and champagne flutes. Emily filed a lawsuit, and the court was unforgiving, ordering repayment through garnishment of their retirement accounts. They tried to negotiate, sending Emily a check for $2,000 with a letter promising more soon, their handwriting shaky with desperation. I refused. "Full repayment or nothing," I told her, my voice firm. The court agreed, and they paid, each check a blow to their lifestyle. They sold their second car, a flashy convertible they'd driven to galas, to cover legal fees. Their charity board, embarrassed by the scandal, asked them to step down, citing personal conflicts. Friends stopped calling, their social calendar emptying as Bellevue's elite distanced themselves. My mother called, her voice thick with tears, her usual poise shattered. "We're your parents, Laura. How could you do this?" I listened, my heart heavy but resolute. "You made your choice," I said, my voice steady. "Now live with it." My recovery was a battle, a marathon of small victories and setbacks. The immunosuppressants left me nauseous, my stomach churning after each dose, and chronic fatigue clung to me like a shadow, making even simple tasks, showering, cooking, feel like climbing a mountain. I moved back to my apartment, the familiar creak of the floorboards a comfort, but the transition was brutal. I lost 2 major clients who couldn't wait for my return, their emails polite but firm, "We've gone with another designer." My savings dwindled under the weight of copays, therapy bills, and the cost of a new mattress to ease my joint pain. There were nights I sat on my balcony, the city lights blurring through tears, wondering if I'd been too harsh, if I'd burned a bridge I couldn't rebuild. I'd pull out old letters from my parents, their handwriting faded on yellowed paper, promises of love that felt hollow now. The guilt gnawed at me, whispering that I was a bad daughter, that I'd abandoned them. But Maya was there, dragging me to her cafe for coffee and bad puns, her laughter a beacon in the dark. "You're not the villain here," she'd say, sliding a scone across the table. "They are." Jake drove up from Tacoma, his pickup truck rattling with tools, and fixed a leaky faucet in my kitchen, regaling me with stories of his latest woodworking project, a cedar bench for his girlfriend's garden. My support group met weekly, their Zoom calls a lifeline of shared struggles and triumphs. Sarah invited me to her art show, where I bought a small canvas of a stormy sea, its turbulent waves a mirror of the tempests I'd weathered. Elena sent me a cookbook for anti-inflammatory recipes, her handwritten notes in the margins guiding me through meal prep. Priya visited with a fresh batch of scones, her warm smile easing the ache in my chest. My extended family rallied, too. My Aunt Susan, who'd always been overshadowed by my mother's charisma, sent a long email apologizing for not seeing the truth sooner. "We're here for you," she wrote, inviting me to her daughter's wedding. I went, reconnecting with cousins I'd lost touch with, their hugs and laughter a stark contrast to my parents' coldness. My cousin Anna, a nurse, shared tips on managing medication side effects, her practicality grounding me. Financially, I rebuilt step by step, each gain a testament to my resilience. The crowdfunding campaign raised $15,000, enough to cover my hospital bills and therapy, the donations a humbling reminder of the community I'd underestimated. The $10,000 repayment from my parents trickled in, each payment a small victory, deposited into a savings account labeled Studio Fund. I landed a new client, a nonprofit needing a rebrand, and poured my heart into their logo, a vibrant design that won me referrals. Priya spread the word, her bakery displaying my business cards, and soon, I was juggling 3 new projects. Jake told me my parents had moved to a smaller condo, their sprawling house sold to avoid foreclosure, their social circle fractured. My mother tried emailing, her tone softer, asking to talk. My father sent a single text, "We miss you." I didn't respond. Their words were too late, too hollow. I didn't gloat. Their downfall was their own creation, a reflection of the choices they'd made long before my illness. A year later, I stood in a sunlit office in downtown Seattle, the sign on the door reading Laura Bennett Design Studio. It was modest, a desk, 2 computers, a few plants, but it was mine, the culmination of every late night, every deferred dream. I'd hired Sam, a young designer with a flair for typography, whose enthusiasm reminded me of my own early days. We were pitching to major clients, our portfolio bursting with bold, innovative work, logos for tech firms, branding for local nonprofits, even a mural for a community center. My health was stable, managed with medication, a careful diet, and regular checkups with my rheumatologist. I'd traveled to Portland for a design conference, my first trip since the illness, where I'd networked with industry leaders, my confidence soaring as they praised my work. I spoke on a panel about resilience in freelancing, sharing tips I'd learned through my own trials, the audience's applause a validation of my journey. My parents sent a letter, their handwriting shaky, asking to meet. "We've changed," they wrote, describing therapy and financial restructuring. I set it aside, unready to open that door. I didn't need their validation anymore. Maya threw a launch party for the studio, filling the space with friends, clients, and my support group. Sam brought his guitar, strumming a goofy song about fonts that had us all laughing. Jake raised a toast, his voice thick with pride. "To Laura, who built this from nothing." Sarah's phoenix sketch hung on the wall, a symbol of my rebirth. Mrs. Chen sipped wine, her smile warm as she chatted with Priya. My cousins danced with clients, their joy infectious. I thought of that hospital room, the phone call that had broken me, and the moment I'd chosen to rebuild. My parents were ghosts now, their lives diminished by their own hands, their condo a far cry from their former grandeur. They'd thought I'd falter without them, but I'd created something brighter, a life of purpose, love, and strength. What do you do when the people who should lift you up tear you down? You rise, build a world of your own, and let their absence become your freedom.